Dragons, gift of the night fury. Everyone in Burke was in a jolly mood. The annual winter holiday Snoggletog was fast approaching. Decorations and lights were going up all over the village, and this year's celebration was sure to be one to remember, now that Vikings and dragons were living in harmony. Early one morning, a few days before Snoggletog, Hiccup and Toothless went flying just like they always did. Hiccup helped Toothless fly by controlling the mechanical tail he made for his dragon. The best friends were practicing some new tricks when all of a sudden hundreds of Burke's dragons flew past them, all going in the opposite direction. One of the dragons got so close it knocked Hiccup's helmet right off his head. Toothless dove down after the helmet, but Hiccup knew there was no time. "We'll get it later, bud," he told Toothless. "Right now, we need to find back what's going on." Back in Burke, the Vikings were panicking. "What's going on?" cried Astrid, one of Hiccup's best friends. "Where are the dragons flying away to?" someone else asked. "What if they never come back?" "Where are all those dragons going?" asked Stockett, the chief of Burke and Hiccup's father. The Vikings gathered in the great hall. "Snoggletog is ruined," someone yelled. But Stog knew better. "We've been perfectly happily celebrating Snoggletog without dragons for generations. There's no reason we can't do it again. We don't know where our dragons have gone off to, but we have faith that they'll come back soon." The Vikings weren't so sure, but what choice did they have? Snoggletog will go on to winter without the dragons. That night, Hiccup and his friends walked sadly through the village. It seemed so empty without the dragons. The only one of Hiccup's friends who didn't seem sad was Fishlegs. No one knew what that was about, and Fishlegs wasn't telling. "I have an idea," Astrid spoke up. "Let's come up with a bunch of new holiday traditions to bury the sadness." "You might be onto something," Hiccup agreed with her. "Easy for you to say," Tough Nut said to Hiccup. "Your dragon can't go anywhere without you." Hiccup knew Tough Nut was right. It wasn't fair that Toothless couldn't fly without him, so he made a new tail for his dragon, one that Toothless could use to fly on his own. The next morning, Hiccup gave the new tail to Toothless. It didn't take long for Toothless to get used to it, then whoosh! Toothless flew off into the sky without Hiccup. 3 days later, Toothless still hadn't returned to Burke. Hiccup felt sadder than he had in a long time. He was wandering around the village when he saw Fishlegs carrying a large basket of fish into the barn. "What's that about?" Hiccup wondered. Soon Fishlegs exited the barn. His basket of fish was gone. Once the coast was clear, Hiccup peeked through the barn doors, curious to see what was inside. And that's when Fishlegs' Gronkle dragon, Meatlug, burst out of the barn and flew high up into the air, taking Hiccup along for the ride. "Hiccup, where are you going?" Astrid yelled to her friend. "But what about the presents?" Meatlug, Fishlegs called to his friend escaping the barn. But Meatleg and Hiccup were already too far away to hear them. Astrid, Fishlegs, and the rest of Hiccup's friends wandered into the barn, where they found a pile of eggs, Meatlug's eggs. That gave Astrid an idea for a new Snoggletog tradition. Since everyone in Brick was missing their dragons, they could give everyone a dragon egg as a present. Meanwhile, Meatlug and Hiccup arrived at a nearby island. All of Burke's dragons were there, except Toothless, and there were lots and lots of baby dragons. Everywhere Hiccup looked, a new dragon was hatching. Now Hiccup understood why all the dragons had left Burke. This island was where they came to have babies. Hiccup watched as a mother Gronkle pushed her eggs into a pool. The eggs exploded underwater and out swam baby Gronkles. "It's a good thing those don't hatch on Burke," Hiccup observed. But little did Hiccup know that his friends had placed one of Meatlug's eggs in every hut in the village. Astrid was pleased with her new tradition. Fishlegs agreed. Everyone was going to be so surprised, he said giddily. But instead of squeals and delight, explosions started going off throughout the village. That's when Astrid and Fishlegs figured out how baby Gronkles hatch. "The eggs exploded," Astrid shouted. The villagers ran out of their huts to safety. This was not exactly the warm, fuzzy holiday tradition Astrid had hoped for. Back on the island, the dragons and their babies were getting ready to go back home to Burke. They wanted to be there in time for Snoggletog. The older dragons started to fly away, but the baby dragons were having trouble. They were still too little to fly. Luckily, Hiccup had an idea. A few minutes later, everyone in Burke was staring up at the sky. The dragons and Hiccup had returned, and they were hauling a ship filled with baby dragons. To the Great Hall, announced Thayak, we finally have something to celebrate. That evening, the Great Hall was filled with sounds of happy Vikings and dragons. Everyone agreed that this was the best snuggle talk ever. Everyone except Hiccup. Toothless was still nowhere to be found. Asher, where did Toothless go? Hiccup asked. I don't know, Asher replied. But just as she finished speaking, the door to the Great Hall opened and in zoomed Toothless. Hiccup gave his dragon a great big hug, and Toothless placed Hiccup's snuggle talk present right on his head. It was Hiccup's lost helmet. Hiccup thanked Toothless. You're amazing, bud. Happy snuggle talk, shouted Istrid. The next morning, Toothless wanted to go for a ride, and he wanted to use his old tail, the one that Hiccup had to control. You don't need this anymore, Hiccup told him. Toothless fanned out his new tail and then smashed it against the ground. Staring at Hiccup all the while, Hiccup finally understood. His friend never wanted to fly without him ever again. So Hiccup attached the old tail and off they went. It was indeed the best snuggle talk ever.